And just one last thing, on the Lands Tribunal website in English and Chinese is the pamphlet describing the mediation process. So you can all access that.
政府網頁上面咧，你哋可以揾到係土地審裁處呢個關於案件管理及調解，咁啊入邊有晒所有嘅細節，大家可以睇到嘅。
OK， 咁跟住有咩問題咧，就可以等阿Dr. Fiona 講完之後咧，我哋就開始答問大會。而家有請阿Dr. Fiona，Dr. Fiona please。咁佢會幫我哋講解關於點樣去做一個負責任嘅主人嘅。俾啲掌聲俾 Dr. Fiona。
Good evening, everyone. I think some of my points have been covered by other people already, so it's always good going at the end. To give you a little bit of historical background, the SPCA office has been around for quite a few years, this year being our 88th anniversary, and housing issues have frequently in the past caused animal welfare issues for companion animals. Historically, this was more of an issue with public housing.
我哋係Fiona係話係佢係愛護協會愛護動物協會嘅
Historically, the problem has been with public housing.
喺 public housing 喺呢個公屋居屋情況，有好多時候都會遇到一啲關於寵物飼養嘅情況。
I'm not sure whether many people can remember issues in 1996 with a crackdown by the housing authority.
喺1996年嘅時候，係有一啲問題出現咗。
At that time, the housing authority had been lenient in implementing their policy for the previous 20 years.
喺過去20年係曾經喺呢個事走前喺呢個公屋居屋上面同政府有出入嘅情況。
However, they were slightly caught out by the fact that in 1991, pet keeping became a current trend. And in between 91 and 93, there were 30,000 dogs imported for the pet trade.
哇！1991年嘅時候，甚至係有遇到一啲情況係一啲呢個寵物係買賣一啲唔係咁正統嘅方式嘅情況之下出現。
In 96, there was a sudden unilateral action on the housing authority's part to enforce the policy, even though the SPCA had been working or trying to work with them for the previous 3 years to highlight the problem and trying to get them to take steps to mediate and actually regulate and maybe relax the rules slightly.
喺1996年嘅時候，甚至愛護動物協會都有參與呢一啲，希望可以調解到減輕呢一種嘅非法嘅情況，買賣動物嘅情況，咁一路都糾纏緊嘅。
At that stage, we weren't successful, but where we were successful to a degree was working with some private housing developers and private estates who were tending to follow the trend set by the government on a complete ban on pets.
咁喺呢個情況嗰時候，一啲住宅上面都會遇到一啲咁樣嘅同樣情況。
In 2003, post-SARS, again the government decided to implement their ban on pets, targeting specifically dogs, and we managed this time with the aid of some other organisations, protests and lobbying, to get a temporary permission instated and actually to change the policy on keeping smaller pets such as cats and rabbits.
喺2003年嘅時候，政府就嘗試去改變一啲情況，去幫助呢啲organisation 呢啲咁嘅組織，去能夠令到件事可以防止呢啲阻止啲動物喺屋企裏面出現。
Sorry, problems with translation. This led us to doing some interesting research because we were interested in how this problem had arisen a second time.
喺呢啲情況再出現嘅時候，不停咁樣再重複咁出現。
So we looked at the attitudes of people in public housing and also people in private housing.
甚至係一啲公屋或者私人屋苑嘅情況，SPCA 都好關注大家嘅態度佢哋係點樣嘅。
And what we found was that many dog owners were not aware of their DMC.
有好多原來呢啲動物嘅主人都係冇察覺到有一啲嘅 DMC 呢啲咁嘅條款。
If they were aware of it, they chose to ignore it.
佢哋即使知道都會選擇係會睇唔到，聽唔到。
Most didn't know any house rules.
亦都冇一啲嘅規矩。
And then we asked a question that if your housing estate or management committee decided to have a forum on pet keeping, as a dog owner, would you participate in that forum as an interested party or a stakeholder?
咁佢哋就開始去詢問一啲關於屋苑或者一啲嘅管理物業嘅人身上，話如果有呢個情況出現，佢哋會點樣去處理呢？
And surprisingly enough, only 19% of dog owners actually would actively participate in any proactive discussions to actually try and create a relationship. So to me, when I'm talking about responsible pet ownership, there is obviously some discrepancy between the wishes of dog owners and actually their actions.
反而有19% 嘅呢啲寵物嘅主人咧，係只會參與或者會有興趣去 take part 呢一個，去參與呢一個負責任嘅寵物主人嘅活動。
So from a responsible pet ownership point of view, obviously before you move into housing, you need to do some thorough research.
咁你需要亦都去做一啲嘅調查，去研究下呢一個寵物負責任寵物主人係牽涉啲咩嘢。
And there are certain situations where you may find after you've moved in somewhere that you're actually in breach of certain terms and conditions. And we would actually recommend that you are responsible and actually try and be proactive, creating dog groups that can address issues, follow some of the measures that I think that I think are on Kevin's list.
係咁所以咧，對於一啲有狗嘅組織嘅主人佢哋係應該要再參與多啲去研究下關於頭先Kevin講嘅一啲嘅條款，點樣去調解如果遇到呢啲屋苑裏面有一啲阻止養寵物嘅情況。
And obviously, if you get to the state where you're receiving warning letters, don't ignore them. Try and go to mediation. And the best thing for us all to do as sort of animal lovers and dog owners is actually to have a code of conduct and to acknowledge that actually people who live on your estate may actually not be that comfortable with dogs, and do as much as you can to avoid conflict in the first instance.
咁盡量如果你遇到呢啲情況，第一時間去了解同埋去參與，去知道多啲嘅時候，就可以提防嗰個情況惡化咯。
Thank you, Dr. Fiona. 咁咧就聽完咁多位講嘅嘢，開始有少少了解係咪啊？我哋今個座談會所標榜嘅嘢。咁咧就而家咧就開始我哋嘅答問時間啦。咁有少少要求你哋台下觀眾嘅發問嘅嘢要精簡。咁我容許你哋咧就同一時間去發問2個問題。咁真係要精簡，因為亦都有好多我諗嚟得呢個講座都有好多人面對唔同嘅問題啦。咁亦都希望會俾多啲機會俾其他嘅觀眾去問一啲問題啦咁樣，好嘛？有冇邊位想問先？有冇人想問啊？冇怕手喎，冇怕手喎，有冇人想問啊？有。Lily。
大家好，本身我係公務員嚟嘅，咁我係消防員嚟嘅。咁咧唔知點解我哋嘅公務員事務嘅條例規定咧，就係消防員就佢哋嘅宿舍咧係唔可以養狗，但係隊長就可以。我想請教呢一條例咧，其實有冇得可以打咧？可唔可以衝擊到佢咧？其實變咗我有相對嘅年資，我都唔敢攞宿舍而家。
Okay, this gentleman is a fireman. Okay, he lives in the staff quarters. That saying that firemen cannot keep the dogs, right? Pets. But except the captain, right? The captain senior. The senior staff can have pets at their staff quarters, but not for the firemen. So he wants to ask is if any law binding about, this kind of stuff. I think Kevin can maybe, answer some She has a question for you.
I've heard about that before with some of the other services in Hong Kong. The senior people are allowed to keep the dogs and no one else.
Staff quarters?
Yes.
Oh my God.
So it depends, of course, upon the rules of the equivalent of the house rules for the staff quarters, and also the terms of your employment. Some people have different terms about what they are allowed to do and what they are not allowed to do. But generally speaking, if the rules are silent about keeping dogs depending on your level of seniority, the senior people